Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and before we get started, this video is sponsored by Butterfinger. If you somehow didn't know, Final Fantasy XIV and Butterfinger have teamed up to bring us the Chocorpiker mount. To earn it, you simply need to buy $5 worth of Butterfinger and submit an image of the receipt to gamewithbutterfinger.com. This is available through June 30th, 2021, while supplies last. You must be 13 or older and located in the United States. For terms, please check gamewithbutterfinger.com as well. You know, they actually sent me some swag as well as some Butterfingers in order to record this, but I just couldn't find any of the Butterfinger when I went to record this. I really don't know what could have possibly happened to them. Anyway, check the description of the video for a link. That link actually directly supports the channel, and of course, gamewithbutterfinger.com is also down there. Now with that, on to the video. Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to do a breakdown for the full trailer of Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, Endwalker. It is full of references to Final Fantasy XIV's overarching story, as well as several franchise references and even cultural ones. Now, I gotta say, definite spoiler warning for this one. Across every expansion, there's no way we can get through this without spoiling a lot of old information, and some of it a little more recent, like 5.4 and 5.5. So you've been given your warning now, but we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Alright, so this introduction starts with a direct shot of the moon before showing the Warrior of Light walking on the surface of said moon. Now, much of the player base has expected to visit Hydaelyn's remaining moon since about 3.0, when we saw the Ascian Elidibus standing upon it. This occurs several more times throughout the story, and our climactic finale between Hydaelyn and Zodiark will definitely be taking us there. Now, the moon is often used as a plot device across the Final Fantasy games, but most notably, the moon in Final Fantasy IV is where the final dungeon of the game actually takes place. It's where the whole finale takes place, as a matter of fact. It contains tons of deadly monsters and moon people, known as Hummingways. In Final Fantasy XIV, we will be getting Hummingways, but they're going to be called Loporrits instead, mostly following their design from the DS and sequels of Final Fantasy IV more closely than the original of them. The only difference is that Hummingways lived on the Red Moon in Final Fantasy IV, whereas in Final Fantasy XIV, our Red Moon was Dalamud, which was revealed to be a prison for the Primal Bahamut. Another fun fact, in 1.0, it was originally planned for the players to travel to Dalamud as a zone, so this all feels like it was just kind of inevitable.
The final days were upon us. The fabric of the star had begun to fray, its lands rent by tooth and claw.
The theme playing here is the complete version of Endwalker's theme from the teaser. It now features male vocals from Sam Carter of the Architects, a British metalcore band that has come highly recommended since it was revealed he was the lead singer here. The lyrics, or what we can tell of them, appear to focus on the final days, both the original event 12,000 years prior and the current one that is being brought about. Can't wait to look back on these lyrics after finishing 6.0's story. Now, over the lyrics here, we can hear the voice of Emmett Selk, the primary antagonist of the previous expansion. It was through him that the player learns of the truth of the Ascians and the ancient people that they sought to resurrect. He also told us of the final days, and his narration here is being recited line for line from a previous cutscene with him in Shadowbringers. This happens over the fires engulfing the map of Hydaelyn, or at least the parts of it that aren't obscured by clouds. Now, the next scene shows Levier, one of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, battling several Void-Sent dragons. Sporting a new garb for 6.0, she is representing the Red Mage job here, her job choice since Stormblood. The battle is taking place in the ruins of Nim on the Isle of Vilbrand, an old civilization that was once decimated by a green plague that turned many of its citizens into tonberries. While it said they survived the Great Flood that wiped out several other nations at the time, the Tonberries that were locked in the Wanderer's Palace are really all that remains of the civilization other than the buildings you see in the background. Now, the relevance of this scene is questionable to some degree. It really just establishes that there's widespread chaos around the realm. It is also the first location the player sees one of those hulking towers in-game, so maybe it's just a reference to that as well.
Are you all right?
I can look after myself, you know. And I've had enough of this rubbish. Come on!
This scene shows us that the Warrior of Light has job changed to Paladin. Every expansion, the Warrior of Light changes job, starting as an Archer in 1.0, a Warrior in A Realm Reborn, a Dragoon in Heavensward, both a Monk and Samurai in Stormblood, a Dark Knight in Shadowbringers, and finally now, a Paladin in Endwalker. Now, this job change going from Dark Knight in the previous expansion to Paladin here is also a reference to Cecil, one of the main protagonists of Final Fantasy IV. He also job changes from Dark Knight to Paladin throughout the story, though in a much different way than the Warrior of Light. Following all of that up are these floating guns blasting the dragon to death. It's revealed that Alphino, twin brother of Alisaie, has job changed as well to the new job, Sage. It's immediately revealed to be a healer as he approaches his sister to fix her wounds. We know little about this job, as it's really not going to get any more details until we're much closer to expansion launch, but it appears to be Charlien in nature, which we'll dive into a little bit later.
As the chaos spread, the star seemed doomed to unravel, and yet... there were those who stood in defiance of that fate.
The hour is come, Vritra. It's all or nothing.
Alright, so we get a major tonal shift going into the new scene. The theme changes completely, and we're suddenly on an island filled with void scent and terminus beast creatures that accompanied the original Final Days. A dragon swoops down from the sky with a dragoon on its back, Estinian in this case. Now, the music here is a reference to the Heavensward expansion, where the Dragon Song War was resolved after 1,000 years. Estinian was the Azure Dragoon, an elite soldier who channeled the power of Nidhogg through one of the worm's eyes. He is now basically one with Nidhogg, feeling his rage and strengthening his bond with the remaining dragons of Midgardsormr's first brood. Now, while the dragon Tiamat assisted Estinian near the end of Shadowbringers, the dragon in the trailer is actually Vritra. Also one of Nidhogg and Tiamat's siblings, he is one of the 2 remaining members of the brood that the player has never met or heard of up to this point. He is also apparently the youngest of the siblings, though I can't imagine that's by a very wide gap. Either way, he is now assisting Estinian, potentially because his home is actually the location we're seeing in this scene. The scene itself is actually taking place on the island of Thavnair, a tropical location referred to frequently in the game's lore. Plenty of items have come from this land over the years, and it's been a long-time dream for veteran players to visit this location. We see statues of dancers, an elite fighting force from the land that actually became a playable job in Shadowbringers, as well as giant stones sticking out of rocky formations. This stone, known as Giant Skull, is a natural resource of Thavnair used to craft powerful weapons. It is named after a hero who is said to have defeated a giant, and then the stone was naturally born from its blood seeping into the rocks. As for what else is actually happening here, it seems like ice is basically flying down from the sky. How much relevance that actually has here is a bit questionable, that is, if it is even ice and not just more crystal formations forming on the ground after the impact.
But will our heroes deign to play their part?
Now the tone shifts here again, this time taking on a newer rendition of Stormblood's theme to accompany the on-screen characters. The hooded figure is Fandaniel, an Ascian looking to fan the flames of conflict to end the world. He takes on the body of Asahi, a member of House Brutus in the Garlean Empire, and one of the antagonists from the Stormblood expansion. He used this guise to inherit the wealth of House Brutus as its sole remaining member and build the tower you see him in here. This then leads to the peak of the tower, where, sitting upon this throne, is Xenos Galvus, the previous legatus of the 12th Legion of the Garlean Empire, and the primary antagonist of the initial launch of Stormblood. He was experimented on and implanted with the Resonant, an artificial version of the Echo, a powerful ability that lets users basically transcend their own bodies and almost get a semi-sense of immortality. It does also grant several unique abilities depending on the user, such as the player's ability to see into the past, Kryle's ability to hear people's thoughts, and Makoto's ability to see an unchangeable future. Back in Stormblood, he actually battles the player at its initial climax, using the Resonant to possess the primal Shinryu and battle the Warrior of Light. This epic battle granted him the delusion that the Warrior of Light is his friend, the only person he's ever felt any emotion for, even though that emotion is an unending lust for escalating combat that he deems only we are worthy to sate. Thinking that he may never feel this degree of elation ever again, he slit his own throat after losing to the Warrior of Light. What he hadn't anticipated was that the Resonant would allow his soul to possess the bodies of others, leaving him with the desire to reclaim his body and reignite the battle with the Warrior of Light. He eventually achieves this and slays Varys, the current emperor and father. With the help of Fandaniel in Asahi's body, well, we already went over how their plan has been going with the giant tower. His end goal is to have the Warrior of Light absorb Hydaelyn while he absorbs Zodiark and have one final ultimate battle that will once again shatter the star. He is also there to tease something else, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
You took your time. 'Tis as we feared. The respite afforded this land was but fleeting. The end draweth nigh.
Alright, so here we have two more Scions, and that of Thancred and Urianger, discussing the fate of Radzat-Han, the capital of Thavnair and its surrounding lands. It seems that the land was largely untouched prior to these events that we see in the earlier portion of the trailer, and now it's gonna basically fall into oblivion. Now, the city of Radzat-Han is largely inspired by East Indian culture, with several vibrant colors and adornments present in its streets and palaces. The theme playing here doesn't really seem to focus on that though, instead playing an orchestral version of Torn from the Heavens, a popular song from the game's 2.0 origin that is often used to accompany the Warrior of Light. Perhaps the instrumentation is a little bit more apt here than when we hear it in other locations, but realistically it feels like a rendition that could have been played over pretty much any scene. Not really much happens in this scene, just kind of adding gravitas to the scale of this worldwide event without really offering too much insight into this particular land. Alright, so this part's pretty big for veteran players. The map actually zooms out of Thavnair and then zooms in to one of the new cities for the expansion, Old Charlien. This city has been referenced constantly over the past almost 11 years of the game's service. It is the homeland of the Charliens, a collective of individuals who value knowledge and survival over all. Several of the Scions of the 7th Dawn are from this location, many of them ascending to the rank of Archon, identified by their tattoos that you'll see on their neck and face. Now, this city-state once actually had a colony on the mainland in the Dravanian hinterlands and was friendly towards the other city-states of Eorzea. However, when Garlemald set their sights on Eorzea after conquering Ala Mhigo, they withdrew from this new Charlien and sequestered themselves on their homeland to the north, an island known as the Old World. Now, that name is probably pretty telling given everything that we go through in Shadowbringers, but that sounds like a whole nother discussion that we can probably wait a little bit to have. The structures we see here are largely inspired by Greek mythology and architecture, seemingly right out of the history books, as almost anyone could tell immediately. The theme also shifts to match this almost fairy tale-esque city. It sings of hope, from the imagery of wings to the melody of songs. Considering Louis-Sois Levier, grandfather of Alphinaud and Alisaie, often spoke of such hope, and he even became a mighty phoenix to smite down Bahamut, it makes this all pretty fitting as a backdrop to Old Charlien, even if their values are quite different from Louis-Sois and his grandchildren. Oh, and also big shout out to Amanda Aiken for all the female vocals that you're hearing during this trailer. In fact, the Charlien part is one of my personal favorites.
wait. This star still has secrets to tell. Take care, my friend.
Now, after some beautiful shots of the city, the camera descends into its deepest recesses to find Graha Tia combing about locked away knowledge. While this Graha, formerly the Crystal Exarch from Shadowbringers, has had over 100 years to pursue the knowledge of the Crystal Tower, he now seeks to know what Charlien keeps from the world. His discovery appears to be one of great urgency and importance, claiming the Star of Hydaelyn still has many secrets that we don't know about. It's likely this knowledge will actually propel us not only into the climax of the current story arc, but into the future as well. I'm hoping he finds a way to the moon, because we're going to need that pretty soon.
Charlien would keep its counsel while the world is lost to ruin.
It would. Come what may, we shall live on. We must.
Do as you must then, but we scions will fight until the heavens fall, until our last breath.
Alright, so the theme here is actually an alternate rendition of Shadowbringers' main theme. You can hear the iconic lyrics, "One brings shadow, one brings the light." It only plays the first little bit of the lyrics here before the conversation takes over, but for this to accompany Y'shtola here as she chastises the Charlien Forum for ignoring the final days, speaks to what are obviously selfish and nefarious secrets that are being kept by the Charliens. Now, speaking of this meeting, the Elysian man front and center is almost certainly Fortunat, father to Alphinaud and Alisaie. Despite the nature of his father and children's interest in the affairs of the Star, Fortunat closely follows the principles of Charlien, protecting themselves and their knowledge above all else. This is apparent in his denial to assist the world with the coming calamity, and I'm sure we're going to be coming to a head with him many times throughout the story. Now, Ethis also pointed out to me through coverage of this when it first came out that the council room here is actually designed in that of a logarithmic spiral. While it's always naturally occurred around the world from hurricanes to the shapes of galaxies, it was first described by Albrecht Dürer in 1525, where he described it as the eternal line, a fitting name given the Charliens' belief that they must survive above all else. Now we return to the main theme of Endwalker here for this final barrage of scenes. We see all the different characters that we've seen throughout the trailer looking up at the moon itself, symbolizing its importance in the final chapter. As it is believed to be the prison housing Zodiark, the overarching antagonist of the entire game up to this point, there is no doubt it is where our journey comes to a head. Also a specific note, Xenos here stands up and is holding a giant gun sight, something that seems to be fashioned in a Garlean sense, even though it seems a little bit deeper than that. This is actually teasing a new job that was revealed at the previous FanFest, the Reaper, who is going to be summoning Void Sense through its body in a very anime way. That's the least I can say about it, at least for now. We don't really have much details on it. Now, the lyrics here mostly speak about forging ahead despite overwhelming odds, indicating the hopes of Hydaelyn and the people of the Star, which really brings us to our final scene.
Green blades, dark and light. Tolling the coming of the end.
And with that, we return to the Warrior of Light from the beginning, standing on the surface of the moon. He is attacked by a terminus beast known as the First Doom. It actually appears in the Amarot dungeon in reference to the beginning of the End of Days, though the one on the moon clearly forgot that it was only level 80, while the Warrior of Light is now level 90. With that, and the end of Emmett's narration about the final days, we pan out and show the moon eclipsing Hydaelyn from our view. This not only symbolizes the overbearing shadow being cast on the planet, but paints them in an equal light, two absolute forces opposing one another. The logo, of course, features what appears to be a spaceship, likely the one we'll use to get to the moon itself. It is notably not the lunar whale from Final Fantasy IV, which is actually now purchasable as a mount in the game and can carry up to 8 people. Buy yours now. And that concludes my breakdown for the full Endwalker trailer for Final Fantasy XIV. I really wanted to make this because the trailer is really a culmination of all of the years of struggle that happened inside the game's world, and honestly the struggle of some of us players who have been around since the 1.0 days. It was a lot of fun breaking down both cultural and franchise references, and hopefully you enjoyed that, even if it went on longer probably than it needed to. I mean, it's me after all. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and if I missed anything, talk about it in the comment section below, but spoiler warning for that too. If you scroll down on this video, there's a good chance you're just going to find a truckload of spoilers. But with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.